I'll have to press a button. There we go. I know some of you have just come in anyway. Sorry about that. We're back in Tadasana. Tadasana, Namaskara, as I mentioned. And that is hands to the heart, feet together or close, but definitely level. It's much easier, I think, to have the feet wonky if they're not together. So be aware of that. Be aware of making sure the feet are not wonky. Interlace your fingers to their roots, stretch your arms diagonally down, raise your arms up without impinging on the roots of the neck. Lightly tone your tummy as the arms raise up. So that light tone means that as the arms go backwards, of course, something has to hinge that backwards action, which is the lumbar vertebrae. As they go forwards, causing a nice lumbar lordosis, we all have a lumbar lordosis, an inward curve, increases that, but we want to limit that. So that's where the belly comes in. As the lumbar lordosis goes forwards, the belly goes backwards, and the only choice for the energy, therefore, is up. So stretch up, and this means that you can stretch some of those lower back muscles that love a stretch in the morning, like the quadratus lumborum and some of the fibers of the latissimus dorsi, and so on. So really get into that stretch. You might move, say side to side, or bend a knee, or look for flow everywhere. Release any tension, say in the neck or in the back. Just try and lift and stretch and lift, all based on this coming together, getting everything, all the fibers of the body, all the intentions that drive the fibers of the body to come together. Take a big circle, hands to the heart, back to Tadasana, Namaskara. Take a deep breath. Or 2, or 3, or 4. So as the deep breaths come and go, jaw is soft, eyes are soft. Perhaps the pelvis moves naturally as a sort of expression of our tuning in. Ralph's here, as you can hear, he's Ralphing around. That's the cat. I call him Ralph. His actual name is Wincy. But anyway, he's in a bit of a sort of greedy breakfast moment. I have given him his breakfast, but I think he wants more. Anyway, release. I'm just letting you know that if you hear a meowing or if I have to move because he's doing a raid, which he does do. We're coming to tree pose. Bring one foot up into the inner thigh of the other leg, hands to the heart. You can use a chair to help your balance. It's traditional to use support or props. So in very old textual sources, for instance, Strabo's Geographica from 150 before Common Era, we have the testimony of the Greeks talking about seeing people standing on one leg holding a stick. So that's a prop. And then later, we still have practitioners now using swings to support themselves, often, but not always, hung from a tree. Probably the root of the name tree pose. Jaw soft, eyes soft. Adaptation is natural. Adaptation is natural. It's nice to just know that, feel that, notice that. Okay, release your hands and then your foot, and then take a deep breath in, followed by what usually follows a deep breath in, a deep breath out. Arms by your sides. Imagine the outer edges of your chest muscles softening, and the mental correspondence to what the muscles are doing also softening. So mental correspondence includes wanting, trying, reaching out, expectation, anticipation. These all express themselves in our muscle fibers. So if you release the muscle fibers, you start releasing what drives them. You start releasing anticipation. Anticipation, of course, is us reaching for a future that, in my experience, is never, ever, ever exactly as you imagine it to be. It's always got a little curveball in it, the future. Raise your other heel, coming into Siddhasana again. Heel into the thigh, thigh into the heel, hands to the heart. There are many ways in which one could go about this. As I mentioned, one way is to use a chair, which works very, very well. Breathing through the nose, jaw soft. Adaptation is natural. There it is. Here it is. No one's doing it. It's just there, isn't it? It's natural adaptation. So we're bringing our attention to the selflessness of phenomena. And thereby, we find our true selves. Sort of naturally, by finding the selflessness of phenomena, like adaptation is a phenomena that's selfless. You know, it's not sort of intended or thought, it's not aided by thinking or trying. It's just there, isn't it? The adaptation to balance. Okay, release your hands, well done. Place your foot, wonderful, wonderful posture. Now, you might find it useful to use a prop, like a brick block if you've got one, a couple of regular blocks, or anything from the kitchen. So I'm just grabbing, or whatever room you're in, a book, if you're in a room with books. I'm in a kitchen, so I've grabbed a jar that we house our hibiscus flowers in. Very good for blood pressure. So that is going to assist us in Ardha-Chandrasana, another balancing pose. So that will be placed over this side. Let me show you with a block that might show up better. I'll use a brick block here. Over the opposite side to the side you're going, right? So there's your brick block, there's you. Hands will be on the hips. Now I've got my brick block low. You could be using other kinds of blocks. Some people will need it higher. You can have it this height, or this height, or that direction. There's 4 options, and then there's the option not to have it at all. I'm going to keep it on the 4th setting here. Back toes in, front foot and leg out. If you turn on the ball of the foot and then finish off the turn on the heel, that should give you the best alignment, heel to arch. As you raise your arms when you're ready, make sure your neck feels lovely and soft. And as your arms raise up, the collarbones raise up. And of course, the collarbones are attached to the breastbone and the breastbone's attached to the ribs. It almost sounds like a song. Inhale. Yeah, you got it. Exhale. Pelvis moves. So there's a sort of cutting in at the top of the thigh, a sort of cutting in. Breath is natural. Your arm is raised up. There's a relationship between the top and bottom arm, and that relationship goes from the bottom shoulder blade, traveling down just below the bend of the bottom elbow. A muscular movement that helps the top arm to stay light. Muscular movement of the bottom arm. It's off the long head of the tricep. Don't try and sort of do it, figure it out, anything like that. Relax, soften your face, breathe through your nose. Enjoy your morning, enjoy your yoga. Enjoyment, or bhoga, as it's sometimes called in yoga, is an important part of yoga. The text, the Sankhya Karika, says that phenomena is there for the liberation and for the enjoyment of the essence nature. Okay, arm down, bend your front knee, walk your back foot towards your front foot. This is where your brick block comes in. Should be lined up with your 4 outer toes. It can be any of the heights I've already described. It should be ahead of the foot by at least the length of the block, maybe more. Then you come up. I like to sort of float up before I land, up to you. Try not to turn the toes of the standing leg from the alignment we started off in. Top leg extended. Now have your top arm along your top leg at first. Makes it look more like a moon. It's called Ardha Chandra, half moon. It's full moon today, I believe. But also having your top arm on your top leg, you can use that by walking along your top leg. That pulls the top side of the body back that direction, which extends the bottom side of the body, making it less liable to side flex, which means bending from the abdomen. And that means it's more able to turn. So it's better, basically. Could have just said it's better. Okay, bend your knee, come back a long way. So raising the arm up is fine in Untitled. Of course, it's something we do, but it's also absolutely fine not to, and actually quite useful not to. You can have your hand on your hip or raised up or reaching round and holding your thigh, which I quite like to do. It does depend how long your arms are, though, or how flexible your chest muscles are. Coming up on the inhalation, well done. Feet forwards, hands on the hips. Take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 deep breaths. Walk your feet as you're taking those deep breaths, walk your feet towards each other. So the circulation of the breath, of course, is super important. And then move your blocks to the other side of your mat. Having done so, step yourself to the opposite sides of the side you place the block, so that your foot is right over on the far side of your mat, away from the block side. Turn your back toes in. Turn your front foot and leg out on the ball of the foot first, and you just finish that turn off on the heel. You just finish it off on the heel. And then raise your arms up as they go up. The ribs go up, the breastbone goes up, the spine goes up. Lightly tone your tummy so you can feel even the pelvic floor very subtly, very nicely, sort of buoyantly rises. Inhale, exhale. This is a pelvis movement. So you cut in, there's a feeling of cutting in at the top of the thigh. The side body doesn't bend. And you come down. So do avoid bending the side body. It's very easy to do. One way to help to avoid bending the side body is to make sure your distance between your feet is generous. You can probably see me on this mat, got quite a long stride. It's often known as Utthita, Trikonasana. Utthita meaning extended. Catch your breath. Arm up or down, or round, these are all good options. And it's always worth playing, and it's always worth not worrying as well about anything really. Worry isn't wisdom. Okay, bend your knee, make sure your toes don't turn in as you walk forwards towards your block that should be at least the length of your block ahead of your toes, lined up with the 4 outer toes unless you've turned it around that other angle like I've done, or the fourth option that I mentioned. Breathing easy, jaw soft, eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft, that top arm walking along the top leg, that jaw passive and soft, that top arm walking along the top leg. Why? Well, again, so that we can lengthen the bottom ribs, so that we avoid side flexion, because what are known as the facet joints in the spine don't like to turn while they're side flexed. Make sure your foot is lively, the raised leg foot. You can raise your arm if you want. Some people like to, and that's fine. I sometimes do, but I think it's useful to experiment with this, walking your fingers along your top leg. Okay, well done. You've been there a while. Bend your knee. Come back to a very nice version of your Trikonasana. So, even if you lost some composure along the way, be like a cat. If a cat has a little sort of mini tumble, they always kind of correct themselves and pretend like nothing has happened and recompose themselves. So be like that. Recompose yourself in a beautiful, absorbed Trikonasana. Inhale, come on up. Good job. Turn your feet forwards. Walk your feet towards each other. Kick out those legs a little bit, so you've got a bit of movement and a bit of life. And then I've turned around sideways because it's more informative. You don't have to turn sideways for this. It's just more informative. If you need to look at me at any point, you'll see the shape of the pose better this way. Anyway, it's feet apart and feet level. Level here means You're not turning your toes out on one foot where they're turning in on the other, or, level. If you imagine you're standing on a little railway track and that there are no little trains due for any time in the future, the track, you imagine, runs through the gap between your second and third toe and out to the middle of each heel. Got it? Through the gap between the second and third toe and out through the middle of each heel. Then raise your arms up with tone in the tummy. Make sure you release the roots of the neck. That tone in the tummy is reiterated. I'm just keeping half an eye on the cat who looks like he's about to try a raid. Excuse me if I have to stop him. Sucking in the belly, finding the pelvic floor, making sure everything flows. Press your feet, raise your fingers, inhale. Exhale, bend your ankles, knees, and hips. And you can play up and down, even left and right if it feels intuitive. You can turn the palms from facing in to facing out, so the heels of the hands go up. There's a lot of variations you can play with in this posture. And of course, play helps to retune, to realign various tissues. So to retune, to realign. So we get this agreement, which is one way you could translate the word yoga. Agreement, coming together. So that jaw soft, movements up and down, stand up, big circle, hands to heart, deep breaths. There he is. A few more deep breaths. And then bring your feet together. Bring your feet together. Same pose again, raise your arms up, lightly tone the tummy. I'm afraid Ralph's got quite old and he's a bit of a moany old fella, bit of a moany old man, bless him. He's a sweetie, though. Feet together, suck the tummy in, find the pelvic floor. Make sure you're not tensing up around the upper fibers of the trapezius. Some yoga teachers have tried to get us to avoid that tension rightly by giving the instruction, raise the arms but drop the shoulders. I'm not a fan of that, but I see what they're reaching out for with that instruction. Why not raise the arms but soften the trapezius? Go straight to what you want. So in other words, raise your arms but soften your neck. How do you do it? Adjust your head position in two respects. In the respect of its position in space and time, and its position in terms of attitude here and now. Those two things I found guarantee that you can release tension from the trapezius, and then you don't get that confusing instruction of raise your arms and drop the shoulders, which is impossible anyway. Press your feet, raise your fingers, inhale. Exhale, bend ankles, knees, and hips again. So it's the same pose as we just did, but this time, go the feet together. We can be moving up, we can be moving down. The purpose is tuning in. The movement is the same as the movement one might take with the radio dial to tune that radio in. Stand up when you're ready. Big circle. Hands to the heart. Tadasana Namaskara. Utkatasana is great for getting the heart rate going, I find. Jaw soft, eyes soft. Release the hands. We're going to come down into Adho Mukha Svanasana. So forward fold or bend your knees, but don't let your back round. Hands forwards, feet backwards. And we're coming into this very well-known posture. Just tuck my t-shirt in for this. Very well-known posture in what's called modern postural yoga, MPY. So this term modern postural yoga, of course, refers to the phenomena of yoga as centered around many, many, many postures, and it's not without history. So, the idea of using the body for yoga practice, of course, is very central to many traditions, not least or most particularly the Hatha tradition. But the proliferation of postures that we have now is modern. And the focus sometimes can be modern, but in Vajrasati yoga, what we're practicing now, the focus is not modern in the sense of we're trying to get, fitter, more productive, more desirable. Those things might well happen. But if you have those as your top goal, then you're missing a goal that's higher. Reach for a higher goal and that becomes umbrella. It reaches into all things. So what is the higher goal? Absorption.
Why is that a higher goal? Because what we're absorbed in is ungraspable. And it's this. So you get into it by moving the body, feeling the movements of the body, tuning in on the relationships, looking in this pose for extension. Huh? So let's move around, tuning on the relationships. Heels go back. There's a relationship with that, and the groin's going up. Calves go back and down. There's a relationship with that, and the shins going up. Just underneath the knees, there's a lift. There's a relationship with that, and the back of the knees going in or forwards. You can feel any of these as I mentioned them. Huh? Front of the thighs go up. There's a relationship between that and the back of the thighs going forwards. Press into your hands. The inner armpits stretch. There's a relationship between that and reaching back to the groins. And a counterbalance comes in when you stretch the outer armpits. And then the under armpit, which is the side of the armpit closest to the legs, joins in. And that balances it. It kind of threads the two together, the inner and the outer. Okay, well done. You've been there probably more that long than you'd like to be. Hands and knees position. Take a few breaths. Wag your tail. Breathe naturally. So here we're just limbering up. We know in terms of factual knowledge that this kind of movement, of course, does limber us up in the sense that it hydrates the myofascia. It also melts the myofascia. It also detunes so we can retune. We call that melting the myofascia. And all of that causes what Buddhists might call non-attachment. But you can just call openness. It's quite a nice way of putting it. Good. Now from here, we're going to raise one arm, one leg, the opposite arm and opposite leg. So start with the leg. You can have your toes tucked under or not, whatever's more comfortable. Opposite arm, opposite leg, let it bob around a bit. The arm might raise up and drop down. The leg might drift left or right. The eyes are soft, the brain is soft, the throat is soft. Breathing is natural. So the bobbing is the sort of tuning. And all tuning first involves detuning. If you have a radio, you know that to find a radio signal, if you want to go from one station to another, there's a moment of detuning before retuning. Back to hands and knees. Catch your breath. Wag your tail if you want to. And hopefully you'll want to because of the way it makes your breath feel. And if you're ready, opposites again. Opposite arm, opposite leg. And let it bob. Bobbing might mean raising and dropping. So naturally, bobbing might mean the leg drifts inwardly or outwardly. Jaw is passive, eyes are passive, brain is passive, throat is passive. So just breathing into this naturally. It's a nice feeling, I think. Okay. Back to hands and knees, catch your breath, wag your tail. You know, cat-cow, as it's sometimes known, has become quite popular. And when looking up the word vitala, which Revitalisation is often used for the cow, I could only find leopard cat. So it's confusing because it might be, I have to do more research, but it might be that the pose has been incorrectly named as cat instead of cat cow. Because of course cow is more commonly known as go or gao in Sanskrit. Anyway, this version that we do in Vajrasati Yoga involves lightly toning the tummy, right? So as we round the back, the upper and lower fibers of the abdominals weave into each other from above and below the background. And you imagine your belly, muscle fibers, drawing into this deep weave, pulling the pubis towards the chest and drawing the chest towards the pubis as if fibers were being drawn in to each other from above and below, sliding alongside each other into this deeper and deeper weave. Now, when you reverse, keep the tone of the tummy that you've created here, but stretch the toned tummy. So the tummy stays toned. This is the muscle cells staying active, but you stretch, you draw the fibers as we're imagining them. We draw the fibers into a longer weave. They're sort of sliding against each other, but at the same time stretching, getting longer, pulling into this longer weave, like stretching and stretching and stretching a piece of material. But the material stays toned. So that process is a process known, of course, as eccentric contraction. Keep it toned now as I'm talking. And stretch and tone, which is a lovely sort of subtle relationship. Now we're going to reverse again. So the fibers draw in towards each other. It's nice to go slow. Instead of pushing up with other muscles that round the back, try to let it be slower. Concentrate instead on the upper and lower fibers drawing in to each other into this deeper and deeper and deeper weave. Breathing, of course, in and out as usual, as natural. Just one more time through the eccentric contractions. Much slower process, isn't it? Both ways have benefits. So the fibers stay close as they're pulled into this longer stretch. They're almost as if they're pulling against each other, but they're also toned. As you stretch the tummy, there's this tone. Great. Okay, now let the tummy just become natural. Well done. Take the arm. If you've got this screen sideways on, you might not, so it doesn't matter. But if you have, you will take the arm that's furthest from the screen. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. So we're going to bring one arm underneath the body, palm up, and we're going to come down and extend the other arm out. Tadasana. Breath comes and goes, of course. Jaw stays passive. The yogin's breath represents her commitment to flow. Commitment to flow. Jaw soft. Here's Ralph again. Came back in. Now there is another version of the same pose, which we can take by drawing the extended arm backwards. So go ahead and do that now. So you've got your elbow up, and then pressing. You can raise the leg, same side as that raised arm, upwardly, whether your toes are tucked under or not. It's up to you. Very, very different sort of feeling. Quite exciting, actually, because it's all balancy and breath-centered. Eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft, tongue soft. Breathing natural. I like that one. I quite enjoy staying a while, but we'll come down and draw the arm that's underneath out again. Back to hands and knees, catch your breath. You might want to wag your tail just to keep things loose. Take some deep breaths, which represents that sort of looseness. And obviously we're going to turn the other way. I'm going to turn 180 degrees around, but you certainly don't need to do that. I just want to do that so I can still see you on the screen. So that other arm goes underneath, palm up. This helps to stretch into the deltoids and extend out to your fingertips. If your fingers were arthritic and painful, therefore, then you could, instead of having your fingers on their tips, have a block for your hand and have your hand resting on that. The idea of having a raised hand is to keep the anterior spinal space spacious. And that helps anatomically in terms of what's going on with the discs and the nerves, and their lack of compression conduces to a sense of awareness and flow everywhere. But also it taps into, points to tantric and hatha philosophy, which encourages us to feel a connection along a central channel for several reasons. One, to philosophically and physically connect concepts such as Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and manifestation, so that they are as one within our own body through our own connections. And or just to point to a general sense of being centered, being in the middle. Again, if you want to draw that hand back and bend the elbow, then you can take that next quite exciting station where you raise your top leg up. Once more, breathing should be ideally nasal. Jaw is soft, eyes are soft, brain is soft. Breathing into it is a meditative art. Eyes are soft, jaw is soft, brain is soft. Okay, coming back down again, pushing back up again, back onto your hands and knees, walk your knees forwards towards your wrists and turn your hands the other way around. So your fingers are close to your knees and the heel of the hand is facing away. And this, of course, stretches all around the circumference of the wrists. And then you walk backwards if you want to increase the stretch. And you might well not want to, because one quality of an expert yoga practitioner is that she, he, or they know what is enough. If you're able to recognize what is enough early on, then you don't need much. Enough, that is, to serve as a portal for absorption, a sort of pathway from an experience of perceiving things as separate and autonomous and discrete to an experience of perceiving interdependence here and now. When you feel interdependence here and now, then it transcends independence here and now. And all that goes with independence, like I should do this, I should do that, shouldering the weight of the world, worrying about self, pride and all that comes with that, shame and all that comes with that. All of that disappears when you see there's nothing in particular, that everything is actually a field. Knees forwards again. That's a big stretch. Tuck your toes under. This is quite a big stretch too, but very healthy. Lifting the heels of the hands, slowly peel them up and turn them one at a time. The other way around. We're coming to high heel kneeling position. You might want to lean forwards in it to make it less intense. You might want to put a block between the heels and buttocks, or you might find it okay to sit up as I am. Either of those, any of those is of course fine. Chest is buoyant, shoulders are down, eyes are soft, brain is relaxed, breathing is nasal. Big stretch for many of us on the plantar fascia, for the fascia that extends like a web through the foot and connects the toes. And if that plantar fascia doesn't get stretched regularly, then you can have all sorts of problems with pain. Plantar fasciitis, of course, is the inflammation of that fascia. It causes a lot of pain. Very hard to walk if you've got plantar fasciitis. So if you've got it or you get it, this is might be a difficult thing to do, but it will long-term help. And if you ain't got it, this will help to stop you getting it. Interlace your fingers, stretch your arms diagonally, raise your arms up. I know it's so intense for some of you that you're probably thinking, please let me out. Of course, we can come out in just 5 or 6 breaths. Use those 5 or 6 breaths just to play with the pose, trust in the pose, allow the sensations. Don't grasp after them as mine or not mine. They're just sensations. Big wide circle. Good job. Now come out into a regular kneeling, for which again you can have a block between the heels and buttocks. If your ankles are tight or feet are tight, a rolled up blanket underneath the shins, the front ankles. Breathing through the nose, jaw soft, eyes soft, throat soft. I think kneeling is a wonderful posture to be in. Obviously, there's compression placed on the hamstrings and the calf muscles, but also on the muscles of the shin. And that compression can be moved if you roll a little. And that pushes fluid out and then lets it come back in.
Back and forth like that. And as it pushes out and comes back in, the hydration increases. Okay, now we're going to extend our legs out. So extend your legs out. Now here, many of you will find it advantageous to sit on a block, right? This is like this kind of block is a yoga block. They come in other variations, different colors and different materials, but this size is sort of this kind of square block. And again, some of you will also find it useful to use a belt. How do you know if you need a block or not? If you're sitting and you draw the buttock flesh out and back, and then attempt to lift the lower back, if you can't lift it, or if you're not sure if it's lifting, if you're not sure if it's light, sit straight away on a block. Try again, and you'll probably find that it is light. It does feel lifted. Most people are better on a block. Nearly everyone is better on a block. So if you do now come back onto a block, do the same thing, draw the buttock flesh out and back, have a belt nearby, as I mentioned, fingertips on the floor, lighten the lower back. So the lower back has to be able to go in at the beginning of this pose and stay in for the whole pose. That means for some of us, the pose is beautifully practiced pretty much at the upright on a couple of blocks. We can even stretch up if the back is particularly tight at the moment to a wall. Some people are lucky and even have ropes, wall ropes. You can pull yourself up. That's a useful way of practicing. If you move around for a while, the hamstring muscles that attach to your sitting bones do begin to become more hydrated, and they begin to melt a little, and they begin to heat. And that means that for some, well, for everyone, it depends on the time scale, but for everyone, at some point along the time scale, the pelvis will be able to tilt forwards. The pelvis tilts forwards, which means you can lean forwards without losing the inward curve of the back. We don't want an outward curve, we want an inward curve. Here, for most people now, the belt around the feet. For everyone. I mean, only if you've got short legs and long arms is it possible to hold, say, your big toes and still keep the back light and buoyant. So I'm holding the big toes here just because I haven't got a belt nearby, being a bit lazy. But I also, it's okay for me to hold the big toes because the lower back can stay light in that situation for me. But most of us holding the belt. As you pull on the belt or big toes, the back of the body can travel into the front of the body and the front of the body lifts up. And you might find it useful still to sway about a bit. Keep breathing free, swaying about a bit. Jaw soft, eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. If the pelvis tilts, you go with it. If it doesn't, you don't. Watch out for, this kind of, when people start bending and trying to get their head down, absolutely catastrophic in terms of anatomy, physiology, and yoga philosophy. So staying upright and playing with it and just listening for natural releases, non-driven releases. That's what we're interested in. So a few more deep breaths, soft, soft eyes, soft, soft brain, soft, soft tongue. For me, Paschimottanasana is a pose I want to stay in a long time, actually. Because it takes time for that melting to occur. Absolute favorite of mine. And even the Hatha texts, some of the Hatha texts do mention this pose as a pose that one should practice every day. Coming up the way we went down, and we might not have gone down far because we're practicing yoga. So we're looking for an experience of the interdependent rather than gripping, grasping, grabbing. Then we're going to lay down on our backs. Okay, so if you've got a block, obviously you'll need to move that. You're going to lay down on your backs. We're going to lay down on our backs, I should say. Just moving my microphone so it doesn't distort. It sometimes distorts when you lay on your back. Hands under your head. Fingers interlaced.
breathing through the nose. Soft, soft, soft temples, soft, soft, soft forehead, soft, soft, soft eyes. Natural breathing, released lower back. Enjoy. Flex up your hips. That's pretty straightforward. It means lift your feet. Let your thighs move towards the pelvis. Let the lower back remain soft. That softness is psychophysical. In other words, what softness you feel in your body correlates to a softening of the mental states too. Lift up your head, putting no strain on the neck. And you'll feel the upper and lower abdominal fibers sliding into that deeper weave that we looked at in the cat-cow earlier. That deeper weave, breathing through the nose, lower back super soft. It's getting more hydrated through the pressure. Just going to do a tiny bit of toe tapping. One foot comes down and touches the floor and lifts up, and then vice versa. And keep going for 4 on each foot, 8 in total. Keep the lower back very intimate with the floor. Once you've done your 4 on each side, keep the legs up, but lower the head. This is how we can feel into the upper abdominal fibers as they release us down slowly, and then lower the feet down similarly slowly, keeping the lower back close to the floor. As your feet land, take a deep breath in, followed by a deep breath out so you don't pop, and then just let the breath flow now for a few lovely rounds of free flow breathing. Free flow breathing. Now lift up your feet again. Open the angle at the back of your knees to something like 90 degrees. Lift up your head. And we're going to take opposites to opposite. Opposite knee towards opposite elbow. You don't have to reach, so just go in that direction. And then the same the other way. Opposite knee towards opposite elbow. That represents the trajectory rather than the destination or target. Keep going. Do at least 3 on each side. If you want to do 4 on each side, I'm not going to stop you. Try not to pull on the neck muscles, so let the hands, if necessary, slide around the back of the skull. Once you've done your 4, of course, you lower back down, head and then feet, and then you take a great big stonking breath in and a great big stonking breath out. And you let a lot of those deep breaths just come and go. And this is a big part of the yogi skill. Observing, allowing, selflessness. It's how joy comes about in the world. In every situation, selflessness. And its opposite is how sadness comes about in the world. You know? Now raise a leg. Doesn't matter which one. Dorsey and plantar flexor foot. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This, of course, is hydrating the leg, as we described earlier. And you can enjoy that if you want. Sorry that Ralph's in the way a little bit there. From there, turn the heel in, toes out, cross that leg over the other one, go beyond the outer ankle, so that's not sticking into your thigh. Lift the foot that's on the floor, off the floor, lift your head. So now we've got a little stretch in the hip that we can play with, a little movement in the back that we can play with. And there's also some abdominal tone. So you can roll it about any way that feels intuitive. Rolling left, rolling right. Any way that draws us into meditative absorption in the interdependent field. Meditative absorption in the interdependent field. We sometimes call it the goddess. Behind me, I have a picture of the goddess of Bhuvaneshwari. Okay, release your head, release your foot, release the other foot. Tuck under the buttocks, take a breath or two. Before we do the second side, we're going to raise our pelvises up. So walk your feet close to your bum and then simply raise your pelvis and move left and right. The hands are still under the head. You can sway, you can swoop, you can shake, you can bounce. Any of those movements, of course, are purposed for the hydration of the back, to hydrate the back. So bouncing, tilting, swaying, swooping, finding the pelvic floor, stretching and hydrating the lower back so it feels peaceful. Let it just drift back down, nice and easy. Once it's down, don't forget to take a deep breath with an exhale, like a sigh. That's it, like that. And then let that lead to more of those surrendered breaths. I surrender. I surrender. Raise the other leg up. Dorsiplantar flex the foot. Keep those eyes passive. I surrender. Sharanagati means surrendered. Sharanagati. When you've got some movement through the leg and it feels like there's flow and it feels like all that gripping, grasping, grabbing, gripping, becoming, as the Buddha says, becoming this, becoming that, or not becoming, avoiding being this, avoiding being that. Letting go of becoming and not becoming. That's the Buddhist way of talking about it. Heel in, toes out, cross that leg over the other one, go beyond the outer ankle, and then lift the foot that's on the floor off the floor, and lift the head as well. So you've got this opportunity to play, to experiment, to investigate. Moving this way, moving that way, playing with the posture. Intuitively and purposefully. Purpose is absorption. Intuitively and purposefully. So you can roll around as much as you like, but most of us probably cooked by now, so bring the head down, bring the foot down, bring the other foot down, catch a deep breath in with a deep breath out, and then several more. Surrendering to the breath is our method of expressing trust. And trust, of course, is the fundament behind what's called bhakti yoga. Release your hands, hug your legs. Just wrap your arms around your legs. I like to do this with my knees apart. Some people like to do it with their knees together. Either way is fine. You got it, rolling around, rolling left, rolling right. And sometimes pausing on one aspect of the stretch or another. Sometimes we do find very, very juicy moments, don't we? So you might breathe into that very, very juicy moment. But let that flow happen. You could roll around for ages, I think. It's really very beneficial. We're going to gradually, slowly, naturally release and bring the feet back down to the floor and then roll over onto our sides, coming to a position from our side where we can bend the lower knee. Excuse me, got a frog in my throat. We can bend the lower knee so there's 90 degrees between the thigh and the tummy. There's 90 degrees between the calf and the thigh. Just check those two sets of 90. 90, 90, okay?
Having checked those 2 sets of 90, we're going to lift the back leg and see if we can soften the tissue that connects the inner groin across through the pubis, underneath the abdominals, to the sides of the lower spine. And of course, mind is body. So attitude, if we have an experiment with an attitude approach, like if my attitude is one of happiness or gratefulness or enjoyment, does that melt the tissue better? Does that mean the tissue will extend more easily? Usually it does. Or whatever attitude you find. And every so often you land the foot so that the extensions you've created can get kind of bedded in. They kind of get locked in, and then they get used to it, and then they acclimatize, and then they remain, and you can build on them. You can add more. But remember, attitude affects the muscles. We all know it. We know that how we feel affects our necks and our backs and our tummies. And of course, also the psoas muscle. I could do that for ages, just experimenting with how to soften the psoas through different attitudes, perhaps even different phrases. But we're going to land it and suck in the tummy, push down, lift up, then go down to your elbows, forearms and wrists. And at that point, with your elbows a little forwards of your shoulders, we can massage into what's called the thoracolumbar fascia. It sounds more fancy than it is. Thoro is thoracic. That's the name of the vertebrae that attach to the ribs. And lumbar is the name of the vertebrae below that, 5 vertebrae in most people. Although I know one person with 6 lumbar vertebrae. We just move around. Right? So this is the tissue across the thoracic, thoracolumbar, thoracic and lumbar region. Massaging it, feeling it, moving in ways that feel right and absorbing. Top leg on top of the bottom leg, curl up from the side. Good job. Come on up. Then you simply go back down again by swooping the legs to the other side, the other end of your mat. You got it. And bend the leg you're laying on. So it's very, very simple, isn't it? Again, 2 sets of 90 degrees between the calf and the thigh, between the thigh and the tummy. And then extend the inner groin. And experiment. I mean, obviously you don't have to believe me, what I say, but you can see if what I'm saying is right and true. So if I say, I think anyone, we all agree on this probably anyway, but if we propose, if there's a hypothesis that the mind is the body and the body is the mind, then you can test that hypothesis by testing attitudes while moving. If I want to extend that soft tissue, I want to make it softer. What makes it softer? Surrender, breath, attitude of happiness, attitude of gratitude, attitude of enough, contentment, having enough. Try for yourself different attitudes and see what it is that allows that softness. And when it comes, then you've extended the leg, you lock it in by bringing the leg back down, so you've got that extension. And then you can repeat, because you can build on once what's happened there gets established, and you can build on it. Anyway, we're going to land the foot now, sucking the tummy, push down into the hands, lift and turn, elbows, forearms, wrists all on the floor. Playing left, playing right, playing forwards, playing backwards. Really getting some movement of that thoracolumbar fascia with the jaw soft, with the eyes soft, with the brain soft. Obviously, other parts of the body may feel this too. Some people will feel it in the hip and the iliotibial tract. Great. It's a really good pose to spend a while in Vajrasati yoga. We call it Shayana Marichasana. Top leg on top of the bottom leg, just curl on up. from the side. And we're going to sit for precisely 1 minute. If you've got a brick block, that's what you want to sit on. If you've got the other kind of blocks, the flat blocks, as we sometimes call them, like that, then you might want to turn it so the short end faces forwards, and even have two, one on top of the other. If you're using books, similarly, we don't want too broad a surface at this end, right? So brick block or short end of a regular block facing forwards, we're sitting in a pose called Siddhasana. I have to say at this point, it's not suitable for absolutely everybody, but it's suitable for many. The heels line up with each other and the midline of the body. I suppose that many of the Hatha texts tell us is the best pose of all. You're right, Ralphie. What's going on? Sorry, I'm just feeling Ralphie's doing something a bit odd, so I'll put him outside. There you go, buddy. And then palms up, chest up, breathing through the nose. And bringing attention into the heart. Bija mantra, there are many bija mantras, seed mantras for the heart. We're going to chant Hum. Hands to the heart. This is sometimes known as the Dhenu Bija. Represents Dhenu Bija means the sound that a mother cow makes to call her baby to her. So Hum. Deep breath in, inhale. And then a deep breath in and a deep breath out to relax. Feel those deep breaths coming and going. Release the hands. We're going to lay down on our backs. You can use a flat block under your head. It's quite nice too. And we're going to lay for a minute because we're going to finish this class on time. Because I know some of you practice this class before going to work or taking the kids to school. But it is always worth even practicing Shavasana for 1 minute. But if you've got longer, you'll be able to stay for longer. I'll give instructions for coming out in a minute, but you can definitely stay longer if you need to. So laying on your back, palms facing up, head support is often helpful. Shoulder blades scooted under. Total release of the totality of the body's weight. Holding nothing back. Arms, legs, head, pelvis, ribs, everything totally surrendered. Now that's Ralph come in to tell us that that's the end of the minute for those of you that need to move on, but those that don't can stay longer, of course. So you can wiggle your toes, you can wiggle your fingers if you want, now or later. It doesn't have to be now, it can be later. Getting ourselves ready to come up. And by rolling to one side and then the other, and finally bring yourself up when you're ready from the side.